When the texts of Aristotle were rediscovered, we relearned this dialectic, this tool for finding truth. Right. So, Aristotle's dialectic and the Dark Ages. So the Middle Ages, from the 5th to the 15th century, is often characterized by a supposed lapse in scientific and philosophical progress. This itself is questionable. This is more than likely just, shall we say, propaganda, but that's, again, a longer discussion, different time, different topic. Right, now, during the High Middle Ages, looking at from approximately 1000 to 1300 AD, the intellectual landscape of Europe was transformed through the rediscovery of ancient texts, most notably those of the Greek philosopher Aristotle. The significance of the rediscovery of Aristotle's texts is the role of his codified process of dialectic as a systematic tool for intellectual inquiry and problem solving. So now we've got a method of problem solving which is a little different to saying you're wrong or shouting at people, right? Which seems to be the typical internet method of doing so. Of course, you know, I utilize dialectic and sarcasm, although sometimes I'm a little heavy on the sarcasm. So now, Aristotle's works include physics, biology, metaphysics, logic, ethics, aesthetics, poetry, theater, music, rhetoric, psychology, linguistics, economics, and politics. The man had a great interest in the world. He investigated everything. He wrote about everything. He was very, very interested. So he was learned. He's a very highly regarded philosopher, thinker. He loved wisdom. His contribution to logic and dialectic were pioneering. He laid the groundwork for systematic rational thought. So understand, systematic rational thought is not inherent. It's not something you are necessarily strictly born with. Systematic rational thought is a skill we can develop, a skill we need to develop, a skill that early Christian fathers worked extremely hard on, that something that they realized was necessary for properly, rationally, intellectually understanding the world, understanding theology, understanding the Bible, right? Not simply just taking an emotional first assumption approach. So, reasoning to truth via dialogue. Let me get some water. Abdelmasih says St. Gregory of Palamas in the 14th century heavily critiqued Thomas Aquinas and said that if the Western Church keeps staying on this rationalist and empiricist road, the West will become atheistic. Well, you know, there's long been a discussion about literalism and utilizing reason. And I would think that God wants us to use reason, right? So, yeah, but there's probably more to it than that because, yeah, we'd probably have to look into this. Like, who was St. Gregory? What's the context of all of that? We have to look into that at a lot of depth. Want to withhold judgment? Think about it. That said, within the 14th century, atheism was already creeping in, but atheism is not atheism. Atheism is not a neutral proposition. Atheists love to make the claim that it's a neutral proposition. Atheism is directly anti-Christian. Atheism is a cover for a lot of things. Atheism is a cover for, as crazy as it may seem, Satanism, neo-paganism, Neoplatonism, Gnosticism, you name it. And Kitsune says, yeah, agreed, a skill that's severely lacking in this area of Johnny Q's, yeah. So, right. So the dialectic process, as Aristotle described it, involves logical argumentation and reasoning through dialogue. Now here's the thing, we can only both play the game fairly if we both know the rules. Now if John Q. retard is using sophistry and you are using the rational rules of logic, then clearly this is a mismatch. You are talking past each other. Clearly his intentions are different to yours. He's looking to win through rhetoric, through emotional argument. You are trying to discover truth. He's trying to win. He's trying to persuade. He's trying to convince. He's not trying to find what is the truth. He's not looking to break things down. He's looking to undermine or overwhelm. So understand that. AI is learning from Lloyd. Thanks, man. Thanks, Kitsune. Yeah. Look, I mean, yeah, I've always, let's just say, I stay active in a number of issues and areas. I like learning. I enjoy learning, and I think my IQ is higher than room temperature. So now the goal. So Aristotle said, look, this is logical argumentation and reasoning through dialogue, but this is a structured dialogue. There's an outcome. It's a stepwise process. It's an iteration. And this dialogue is between two or more people holding different points of view about a subject. The goal is establishing truth through reasoned argument. The dialectic process is about working through puzzles and difficulties. You break them into a series of questions. You break them down into a smaller, bite-sized series of questions and answers. It's a tool for critical thinking and for intellectual engagement. So the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century AD led to the loss of many Greek and Roman texts, including Aristotle's works. Now, these texts were preserved and studied in the Byzantine Empire and in the Islamic world. And I have here the Muslims, maybe not so much, because this is an example of the standard academic narrative. The standard academic narrative is, not so reliable. Let's just say it's not. So the Byzantine Empire had preserved these texts. So they preserved some of these older texts. They preserved some of these ways of thinking. These tools, these ideas were preserved. Excellent. In the Islamic world, the Muslims did not have Aristotle. They thought they had Aristotle. If you go look at the history, the Muslims were not reading Aristotle. They were reading a Neoplatonist who had, shall we say, to be most generous, paraphrased Aristotle through his own bias. So these Neoplatonists had, this Neoplatonist had, this Arab or whatever, this Neoplatonist had basically falsely interpreted and misinterpreted Aristotle. The Muslims had taken this false interpretation of Aristotle and said, hey, we've got Aristotle, and they'd incorporated into their own philosophy. They'd even taken Plato, but not Plato as such. They'd taken Plato through the lens of the Neoplatonists. So, of course, the Neoplatonists are full of poop, and, of course, therefore, Islamic philosophy is full of poop, right? So when people tell you this, there's more to the story. So understand, take this as a lesson as well, that what you're given is not necessarily true. Stop, withhold judgment. Go look, examine everything, break it down into small components. See if that is true. And it takes time, it takes effort, it takes weeks and years and months, hours and days to go through this. You have to question your assumptions. You have to ask yourself, am I being led to think a certain way? So to focus here so that because are they trying to lead me away from focusing somewhere else? Right? Ask yourself these questions. So now, Gerard of Cremona. So these texts were largely forgotten in Western Europe until the High Middle Ages, roughly 1000 to 1300 AD. Okay, so this is one of this little pages here. This is from Gerald of Cremona, right? One of his writings. So the recovery of Aristotle's texts was primarily facilitated through contacts with the Islamic world, particularly during the Crusades and through Spain, by Islamic, Christian, and Jewish scholars in the libraries and schools of cities like Cordoba and Toledo. Now, I've been to Toledo, beautiful place. A significant historical figure in this process was Gerard of Cremona. He is an Italian scholar. He traveled to Toledo in the 12th century AD to access Arabic versions of Greek scientific and philosophical texts. He translated more than 70 works, including many of Aristotle's texts, from Arabic to Latin, making them accessible to scholars across Western Europe. I know, why didn't he just go to Kinko's, run off a few thousand photocopies cheaply, distribute them to everyone? Who knows, right? It might be that things were a little different back in the 11 and 1200s. Let me just check if I missed any comments. If you want to trace back, atheism goes back to the Neoplatonist philosopher John Italos, who influenced the Italian Renaissance, occultism, the Enlightenment, and Spinoza. You can trace it back to the Greeks as well.